First time here, or maybe just your first time here in a long time, we just want you to know that, we are so excited that you've taken the time to come and just chosen to celebrate with us today, as we really do hope that this is a place where you can just feel at home, where you can just honestly just be at ease here, be yourself here. Listen, if you were expecting to find me all dressed up in my Easter Sunday best suit today, I hate to disappoint, but as those who've been around here for some time would probably attest to, this is as good as it gets for me. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from here, so sorry, guys. But I really am excited to get into the Easter story today by kicking off a message series we're going to be in over the next few weeks as we look at the ultimate funeral crasher in Jesus. The ultimate funeral crasher in Jesus, who by crashing his own funeral, invites us to cancel our funeral plans. Who by crashing his own funeral invites us to cancel our funeral plans, because I don't know if you know this or not, but on Resurrection Sunday, look, we don't simply celebrate what God has done for us, but we celebrate what he's still doing and how he's still working in our lives today. Which, how many of you would agree, is some good news? Especially if you come in here today with maybe a relationship that feels like it's on life support, or a career or a calling that feels like maybe you've just hit a dead end, or a hope or a prayer that you've come to believe is all but dead and buried. Look, you need to know the promise of Easter is in a God who specializes in bringing dead things back to life. Check this out with me. This is the Easter account we find in Matthew 28. It says, early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Which, by the way, I can't help but find the humor in this. When it says the other Mary, I think like what a bummer. For the rest of all of history, you're always going to be known as just the other Mary. I just imagine being her. Couldn't you have done a little bit better than that, Matthew? Add a few details in, just put me down as the other Mary. But it goes on, it says, suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read this, let's just say I got some questions. I got some questions. The first one being this, is why did the angel even bother rolling away the stone to begin with? Especially when you read ahead into some of the other kind of resurrection accounts. And stick with me on this, but in one of John's accounts of the resurrected Jesus, we find in John chapter 20, it says, verse 19, it says, on the evening of that first day of the week. So again, it's Sunday evening, this is Easter evening, so different chapter, a different book, but talking about the same day. When the disciples were gathered together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Which brings me back to this question I opened up with. Because if Jesus at the moment had the ability to walk through doors, walk through these locked, closed doors, walk through walls, did he not also have the ability to walk through stone? Apparently in this phase, sort of this form of the resurrected Jesus here, for him, matter didn't matter. In fact, I almost called this message, It Don't Matter. Because you need to know, it don't matter how long it's been since you've been to church. It don't matter if you grew up in the faith or you're brand new to this whole church thing, Jesus thing. It don't matter what past maybe you feel like you brought in here or the obstacles that are in your way. The truth is, you need to know there is nothing that can separate you from the love of God and his heart for you. He will fight through every door. He will fight through every stone. He will fight through every wall. Nothing can keep him from you when he sets his eyes on you. That's our God. That's his heart for you. So why then did the angel roll away the stone if Jesus could have just been like, poof, hey guys, peace, right? I think we get a clue in Matthew 28:5, going back to our original text. It says, the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. Going on to say, he's not here, he is risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Come and see the place where he lay. In other words, the angel didn't roll away the stone so that Jesus could come out. He rolled away the stone so that people could come in. So that you and I could be offered this invitation to come into a relationship with him, to step into this new life that's found in him, this new identity that's found in him, to step into this amazing grace that we find in Jesus. Because the stone being rolled away had nothing to do with Jesus' exit strategy and everything to do with his strategy to invite you in. By first inviting us to simply come and see. Come and see. You know, that word see in the Greek means to look at intently, to think, to analyze, to examine. As imagine with me for a moment that the disciples, they start sharing this news. They start going out, hey, come and see, Jesus has risen. Only for some people to get there to the tomb and find the stone still over the tomb. Now, how many know, there'll probably be more than a few of them that might be a little skeptical in this moment. Like, wait a second. I thought you told us he was alive. I thought you told us he was no longer in the grave. Yeah, I did. Well, okay, if that's the case, then move the stone so we can see for ourselves, right? Only for the disciples to respond with, but faith. Faith is believing in what you cannot see, so I'm not moving the stone. You're just going to have to take us at our word. You're just going to have to trust us in all this. No, thank God that the stone was rolled away. Because listen, while it's true that Jesus asks you to believe in what you can't see, he doesn't ask you to believe in what you can't examine, what you can't look into. Because examine means I'm not afraid of your questions. I'm not intimidated by your doubts. Examine means you're invited to interview. You're invited to interrogate. You can look into this and ask and find out for yourself if it's real or not. Because listen, have you ever stopped and thought about, really thought about this long enough to really ask yourself this? What if the resurrection really happened? And not metaphorically, not symbolically. What if it's actually true that Jesus physically got up out of the grave? Because how many know if it really happened, as it did, how many know it changes everything? It changes everything. If the resurrection happened, it's not just a good story, it's the story that redefines every other story. And so let's do a little examination, if you will, together. Because whether or not you buy all into this church stuff, this Jesus stuff, this Bible stuff, I think how many of you would all agree it's hard to ignore or deny the historical significance of Jesus. This guy who would be born to a poor teenage girl, growing up in a blue-collar, ordinary working-class home, never traveling more than 200 miles from the small rural town that he was born in. This guy who never sold a book, never ran a company, never had any kids, never ran for politics. In fact, he spent the first 30 years of his life in relative obscurity, dying at the age of 33. And yet, who can deny that nobody has transformed and reshaped human history and had more of a lasting impact on the history of the world than Jesus? More songs have been sung, paintings made, books sold about him than anyone else in history. In fact, time itself has been forever changed by his arrival. As BC literally stands for before Christ, AD, Adodam Menai, the year of the Lord. All history literally hinges on Jesus. And when Jesus arose from the dead, those in Jerusalem and Judea, they did exactly what we would have done if we were in their shoes. I mean, just imagine, if someone you knew, someone you loved, someone you spent time, some of your best years of your life hanging out with, talking with, who you saw crucified, you watched be killed and buried, only for a few days later decides somehow, shows back up again, invites you to hang out with them for breakfast. What would you do in that moment? I can tell you what I would do. I would tell everyone around, right? I don't care how crazy it sounded. I would tell everyone. You think you used to have friends who would talk about CrossFit a lot? Like that pales in comparison to this news. Just trying to get you to see these are real people who witnessed it, wrote about it, and believed in it, so much so they were even willing to die for it. As we have these 4 historical accounts of the resurrection known as the gospel, which just simply means good news. But even outside the biblical text, we have writers like Tiberius, Julius, Aricanus, Phlegon, Thales, who, interesting enough, not just document things about his life, but actually even referenced his death. All confirming darkness and an earthquake at the time of Jesus' death, just to remind us that, listen, there's something out of the ordinary happened here. In fact, there's a man named Celas who was a 2nd century Greek philosopher and a fierce opponent of Christianity. In other words, safe to say, he was not on Team Jesus. And yet even he could struggle to put together a comprehensive attack on Christianity when it came to resolving why it was that Jesus was able to perform so many documented miracle after miracle after miracle. He couldn't get his head around it. He couldn't come up with a good argument against it. You know, sometimes I'll hear people say something along the lines of, well, I just don't believe in Jesus, as if he's like Bigfoot, or when Jerry Jones every year tries to convince me that this is going to be the year for my Cowboys, right? When the truth is, there's actually more documented historical evidence when it came to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus than there is for the existence of Napoleon and Julius Caesar combined. Or maybe one of the most compelling arguments, I think, for the resurrection is found in the testimony of a guy in the Bible named James, the half-brother of Jesus. So let me ask you just bluntly, what would your brother have to tell you to convince you he was God? Some of you are maybe here with your brother right now, and you're like, yeah, there's literally nothing, right? Like, I don't care that mom thought he could do no wrong and walk on water. Like, I know what he was like when she wasn't around. And yet what we know is that James, while he was still pretty skeptical of this whole thing before the crucifixion and resurrection, like, there was a moment after Jesus rises again, like something changed, where we see him going from doubt to faith, not only going to become a leader in the early church, but actually going on to be martyred for his faith. And what was the turning point for James? What changed everything for him? An encounter with the risen Savior. And look, I know what some of you who are on the more skeptical side might be thinking, because I've seen some of the same Ancient Aliens episodes and conspiracy YouTube videos you have, where it can be easy to wonder if maybe it was just one big conspiracy. Like, how do we know they didn't just fake his death? Well, to that, I would just say this. The Romans were good at a lot of things, not least of which was killing people. Also, they checked. Well, okay, but maybe they're lying. Well, people don't typically die for what they know to be a lie. Maybe you're willing to die for things you think are true but are false, but very rarely are people willing to die for something that they know to be false. Well, maybe they were just mistaken. Maybe there was somebody walking around who looked a lot like Jesus, sounded a lot like Jesus. But I want you to just imagine this. Like, imagine that you lived with, you walked with, you hung out with, you ate with this person, let's say for 3 years. How difficult would it be for someone else to walk in and claim to be him? Like this was always my issue with Superman. Like, how can they not tell that Clark Kent is actually Superman with just glasses on, right? Like you'd think eventually somebody would catch on. Like Lois Lane, she hung out with him all the time. Like, hey, you look really familiar. Like, you think that they'd figure it out. Or maybe they were hallucinating. Paul, interesting enough, in one of the other accounts, he actually references that Jesus at one point in a single moment, showed up to more than 500 believers. A group, not just individuals, but a group. How many know you don't tend to have group hallucinations? So if they're not lying, mistaken, or hallucinating, what explains the fact that these people claim to see Jesus after he died? Because from this point forward, Christianity then exploded in growth within 30 years. where there were not hundreds, there were not even thousands, there were tens of thousands of Christians. Not just in Jerusalem, not just in Judea or Israel, but 1,500 miles away in Rome. Historians note that there's no clear sociological, psychological, or religious explanation for accounts like this on the rise, except if something like the resurrection actually happened. Because catch this, while most religions are built on a philosophy or a teaching, Christianity is based on a very real event. And that event is the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus. It's why Paul says what he does in 1 Corinthians 15:13. If there is no resurrection of the dead, if Christ has not been raised, and listen, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. Because the resurrection isn't simply good advice or a good story. It's the good news because it's true news. And it's this news that we're given that invites us to come and see, not just what God has done, but what God can do. This invitation to find out for yourself if Jesus has resurrected. To come and to look at the tomb where there should be a dead body, but there's no longer anything there. And again, I get the pushback with this. Yeah, well, that's all well and good, Pastor, but it's not like I can just hop on a plane later today and fly to Jerusalem and check it out for myself. Like I can't go to the tomb and take a DNA test. I can't, fill the walls. I can't look and investigate and examine myself. But listen, if you want to examine the claims of the resurrection, I've got good news for you. You don't got to get on a plane and go to Jerusalem. All you got to do is look around you. Just look around you. And listen, I think what you're going to find, what you're going to see is one life after the next of someone who should be dead, but they're not, because of the grace and the mercy and the goodness of our God. As we're just to test this out, we're going to do a little quick Easter survey right now. So I need some help, easy audience participation here. So just if you could raise your hand if one of these questions really applies to you. Raise your hand if there was an addiction that you never thought you could be free from, but that God freed you from. Now keep it up. It's not going to be very long. So here's another one. Raise your hand if your marriage should be over. Like it was on the rocks, like it wasn't, it was struggling, but somehow God restored your marriage. That's awesome. Yeah, some of you got two hands up. Let's go, right? Like, that's awesome, right? Here's another one. Raise your hand if there was a month where you thought you had no idea how you were going to pay your bills, and yet God showed up somehow and provided for you. Yeah, like some of you are like, keep them up. Just got one more. Raise your hand if when you look back on your life in some crazy situations you found yourself in where you should be dead, or the doctor's report told you should be dead already. And you go, I shouldn't be here. But if not, but for the grace and the mercy and the goodness of our God. Now keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now listen, just look around. Just look around, right? Listen, you want to go visit an empty tomb. We got empty tombs all over this room right now. Come on, somebody, don't tell me that God's not real, or that God's not still working, or that God is not still in the funeral crashing business. It's what he does. And look, I share this because the invitation, what I love about the Easter story, it's not just an invitation to come and see. It's an invitation to come and see for yourself. It's an invitation to come and experience it. Look, I think for many of us, this is where the real struggle lies. It's not so much our doubt that's holding us back from stepping into faith as much as it's our fear. In fact, interesting enough, this is sort of where the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders of this day found themselves. Matthew 28:11 says, as the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and told the leading priests what had happened. So you can just kind of imagine, just put yourself in the shoes. Keep in mind, by the way, if this happened, for the Roman soldier, like it was a death penalty. Like it was instant death penalty. The guys who were there supposed to be guarding the tomb. And so, So you can just imagine them trying to explain what happened. Like, it's crazy. There was an earthquake. There was an angel. I'm sure they embellished it some to try to cover their tracks some, right? Like, the angels came. We tried to fight them off, but they knocked us out. There wasn't any more we could do. You can just imagine these religious are like, really, bro? That's what happened? Now, so again, put yourself in the shoes of these religious leaders. They hear this news, they get this news that Jesus is alive. And you got to think about this. All the Pharisees had to do in this moment to verify the claim, whether it was true or false, is just go and see. Just go and see for themselves. Like, it's that simple. If it's not true, there will be a body in the tomb. If it is true, you're going to have to examine that and really wrestle with that. And so you know what the Pharisees and leaders do? Well, check this out in the next verse. A meeting with the elders was called, and they decided to give the soldiers a large bribe. They told the soldiers, you must say Jesus' disciples came during the night while we were sleeping, and they stole his body. You know why they didn't want to go see if Jesus had really resurrected? Again, all they had to do was go look. But look, I believe the reason they didn't go look, the reason why they didn't go see for themselves, is because if Jesus had actually resurrected, it would have blown up everything in their world. It would have turned everything upside down for them. The political power that they felt like they had in that moment, they would have lost. The financial incentives, or like their whole income was based on this religious system that Jesus was, had just totally dismantled and turned up on its head. See, if it was true, they'd have no more income, and they were afraid of what the truth would cost them. And before we judge them too harshly, let's be honest, in some area of our life, I think how many of us can relate to the same thing? How easy it is, sometimes to just not know because of what knowing and accepting would actually mean for us. Like how easy it is to just try to pretend that the truth is actually not the truth. Look, I got a bit of a confession to make this morning. As I remember when Holly and I were first married, we'd oftentimes go over to her parents' house, and either her or her mom would oftentimes make me coffee in the morning because I would typically act like I didn't know how to use a coffee maker, or I didn't know how this stuff was. And this went on probably for like a good year or two until Holly finally caught on, and she really got frustrated by it. And she's like, let me show you where the stuff is. Let me show you how this works. And it's kind of funny too. Once she kind of called me out on it, I didn't have the thirst for coffee anymore. I was like, hey, I'm good actually. It makes me jittery anyway, right? See, here's the sad part about that reality is I could have known. I could have learned. I could have helped, but I didn't want to know. Because I didn't want the responsibility of what knowing would mean for me. The cost of my comfort that I had developed with this. I was afraid I was going to have to start making my own coffee. I was afraid of the cost of encountering the truth. And that's so many of us today, right? We're afraid of the cost of following Jesus. Because we know or we fear that the following Jesus fully, it's going to cost us some. Maybe when it comes to our relationships, we know that following Jesus is going to cost us. Maybe when it comes to some of our coping mechanisms, we know that following Jesus is going to cost us our excuses. Because I'm telling you, as long as you and I, listen, when you step across that line of faith, when you become a believer in Jesus, how many know the excuses go out the window? I can't blame mom and dad for what they did to me or didn't do for me. I can't blame my boss for what they said about me. I can't blame my circumstances for what had happened to me. Believing that somehow this myth that if I can accuse them, I can excuse me. Only for Easter to flip the script. Because how many know if Jesus could come back from the grave, how many know my excuses, all my reasons of why I can't do this and why I can't do that, go right out the window? See, it causes us, it brings us to this place where we've got to start taking responsibility for some of our actions. It forces us to cancel the funeral plans. And as a result, costs us some of the very things we're trying to find comfort in rather than healing for or freedom from. And yet, look, if that's you today, and you're afraid of what accepting an invitation to step into a relationship with Jesus and the cost that comes with canceling your funeral plans comes with, can I encourage you with this? One is you need to know you're already paying a cost. In fact, we see this even in the Pharisees' story. Matthew 28:12 says a meeting with the elders was called, and they decided to give the soldiers what? A large bribe. It was costing them already. See, it was already costing them some stuff. Because here's what I've discovered is while the truth has a cost, how many know so does the lie? And I'm telling you, the lie will always cost you more. As it's true, going all in Jesus, it's going to cost you some things. It may cost you some of your time. It definitely cost you a lot of your comfort. It may cost you your pride. Like following Jesus comes at a cost, but I'm telling you, it pales in comparison to what it's costing you to not. To what your secrets are costing you. Or that addiction's costing you. Or other relationships, your unforgiveness is costing you. Or the empty promises of chasing after that which can only be found in an empty tomb is costing you. As I look over the years, I've come to learn that whenever Holly tries to get me to buy stuff that I'm struggling to buy into, my wife will admit, who admittedly is way better at numbers than I am, she'll try to use math to sell me on it. In fact, I remember when we first moved into our house, one of the first things she went shopping for was a bunch of LED light bulbs. And I remember when I saw the bill for these energy-saving lights, thinking, what? Like, they were so expensive. And I was like, and I think she could tell that I was like a little taken back by the cost of these things. And she's like, hey, don't worry. They're like 50% off. I'm saving us money. To which I'm thinking, yeah, you would have saved us more money if you never bought them to begin with, right? But she said, no, you're looking at it all wrong, because even though we're spending this now, look at how much money we're going to save in the long run. How much money that it's going to save us next month and the month after that and the year after that and the year after that. Here's my point. It's not a cost if it saves. It's not a cost if it saves. Listen to me, this is not about costing you your Friday nights or costing you having fun. It's about saving you from your anxiety. It's not about messing up your dating life. It's about saving you from a broken heart. It's not about giving up your dreams. It's saving you for a bigger purpose beyond what you could ever imagine or ever dream up for yourself. You know, the devil's most powerful lies I've found are his half-truths. And here's the half-truth from the enemy. Following Jesus will cost you. Yeah, there's some truth in that. But you gotta complete it. Yeah, it'll cost you. But you also gotta know that following Jesus will save you. It'll save you. And look, I'm not just talking about saving you from the reality of death, because in case you haven't checked recently, the latest odds that you and I will eventually die are still at 100%. Like, there's a reality to death, but there doesn't need to be a finality to it. But rather, Jesus shows us through his finished work on the cross and the promise of the empty tomb that there's a way to face death and live to tell about it. And look, I don't just mean adding years to your life or even just eternal life, but Jesus, when he comes back, he came back in a way to leave us no doubt about this promise he gives us for life, not just life eternal, but what does the text say in John 10:10? Life abundant, life to the full. And yet, even though we know this, it's amazing to me how often so many of us choose to settle for so much less than that. I can remember years ago, we took Austin to Disney World, this place that I was told is the happiest place on earth. They lied. As I can remember going, and it's the beginning of June in Florida, and so it was like mid-upper 90s, and it was hot, it was muggy. And I remember I'm just like miserable standing in the line to get into the park, and when we finally do get in the park, we got to make a stopover because we're there with some friends, and they got to make a stop at the information area there. And I remember as we're just waiting for them, I'm just looking around, and let's just say, it was a lot of families and a lot of discussions that you don't see promoted on the Disney commercials out there, right? Like I was having a great time just watching, some of the awkward, angry conversations that were happening all around me. Like I remember one kid and some kids and strollers and some parents, like they said words that, let's just say, shouldn't be said in front of Cinderella's castle, let alone church or any other place for that matter. In fact, I remember being there thinking like this is the real attraction right here. Like they can promote this stuff. Like show me on the map. Like forget the flying carpets and It's a Small World. I'm just going to camp out here. But as I'm standing there, like it was all fun and games until the situation started to affect me personally. As I remember looking around and I see Austin just like turn a pale green. And let's just say he started to have an intestinal resurrection in this moment as he's like looking for the nearest tree. And I remember looking at Holly, I'm like, oh no, Houston, we have a problem. And so there's this moment we realize, we're going to have to scrap this whole Disney World day. And so, I mean, we haven't even gotten probably more than 12 steps into this park. And now I've got to suddenly, take him back on the little tram and take him back to the hotel room. And so we get on the tram and it's us and one other really unhappy family who's probably dealing with the same thing. And I just never forget the lady who was running the intercom and running the tram. Like she was so excited. She was so energetic. And she gets on the intercom and she's like, who here's having the best day ever? Which I just remember like looking at her and glaring at her along with this other couple. And I'm just like read the room, lady. Like this is terrible. And yet in her defense, I kind of get it. Because whether consciously or unconsciously, she was just expressing what a lot of us have come to believe and settle for with our lives, and that is, hey, if I'm not dead, it means I'm really living. But listen, when did the bar for our life just equate to just breathing for us? Like, how did that become the standard that we're willing to accept? See, again, I think we need to ask ourselves, why do we so often set such a low bar for our lives? Where we go, breathing, that's it. Just living the dream. This passive-aggressive pronouncement that the life you're living is not the life God intended you to be living fully. This belief that somehow the best that God desires for you is to just survive and wait for the time to tick down till you get to heaven. No, listen. Part of the hope of Easter is it reminds us He created you for so much more than just that. Not just life eternal, but life abundant. This life that's found in a relationship with Him. He rose from the grave to actually eliminate those excuses and all the reasons that would try to convince us to settle for less than the freedom and the joy and the peace and this purpose and significance He calls us to. Let me put it another way. Jesus didn't stay in the grave. Neither should you. And look, I wonder for some of us, what are we choosing to settle for? The unforgiveness we're choosing to settle for. The disappointment and discouragements in the past we're continuing to live in. So here's my final invitation. We'll wrap up with this. And it's this invitation He gives us to simply come as you are. As let's be real, some of us, the struggle to go in, to step into this relationship with Him is not so much the fear, but doubts. It's not so much that we struggle to believe that Jesus would come back from the grave. It's that Jesus would come back for us. That Jesus would come back for someone like me with all of my messiness and all my junk and all my stuff. In fact, interesting enough, later on in this Easter morning passage in John's account, there's a moment when Peter first steps into the tomb. Remember Peter? The guy who once boldly proclaimed, hey, to get to you, Jesus, they're going to have to get through me. Only for when it mattered most, turns his back on Jesus, pretends to even know Him. And now here he is. He's feeling like he's on the outside looking in, and yet check out what he discovers. After he hears the news, the good news that the Marys are proclaiming. Check this out, John 20, verse 6 through 8. Simon Peter arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from other wrappings. Now, to understand the significance of Peter's discovery here, you got to understand just a little bit about Jewish culture and tradition. And that is, in Jewish culture and tradition at the time, when you were done eating, you would take your napkin, you would wad it up, and you would place it on the table and walk away. And that was a sign saying, hey, I'm finished. I'm done. No more No more soup for me. But if you took the napkin and you folded it, it meant that I'm not done just yet. I'm not finished just yet. I'm coming back, and I'm not just coming back for anybody. I'm coming back for you, Peter. I'm coming back for the same guy who denied me. I'm coming back for the same guy who questioned me. I'm coming back for the same guy who ran from me. I'm coming back for the same person who gave up on me. Because if Easter reminds us of anything, it should remind us of this, is that even when we give up on God, you need to know He never gives up on you. In fact, Romans 5:8 puts it this way, it says, but God demonstrates His own love for us in this, while we were still sinners. Not when you got your life figured out and your act all together, but when you were in your mess, in your addiction, in your brokenness, Jesus came and died for you and for me to ultimately offer us this invitation. This invitation we find in Revelation 3:20, where He says, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. Can I put in terms you might relate to a little bit more? Is listen, I find that Jesus crashed the funeral so you could be invited to the party. This party, this new life, this celebration, this joy that you find in a relationship with Him. See, again, that's why I say I don't think it was by accident that Peter, of all people, would notice that folded napkin. As in John 21, we see Jesus calling out to Peter, inviting him to not just share in a meal, but in what that meal would come to represent, this invitation to a second chance, this invitation to experience new life, this invitation to make peace with his past by making peace with God. This same invitation that He extends and He offers to you today. Whether you're church shopping, just woke up, just got out of jail, or still in jail, you need to know you're invited. If you're more religious than the Pope, or haven't been to church since Aerosmith was good, you need to know you're invited. If you're over 70 but never seem to grow up, or a teenager that's growing up too fast, you're invited into this. This is an invitation for the soccer mom, the ESPN dad, the starving artist, the tree hugger, the tree cutter. It's for the almond, soy, cashew, latte sippers, vegans, and junk food eaters. This invitation is for those currently in recovery or still addicted. You're invited into this. If your heart is light, heavy, or downright in the dumps, where we're guilted by grandma to come today, or got lost in traffic and wound up here by mistake, you're invited. You're invited. What are you invited to? To say yes to Jesus. And by saying yes to Jesus, accepting His invitation to the party. This party, this joy and this significance and this life, not just life eternal, but life abundant, the kind of life that's only found, I'm telling you, in a relationship with Jesus. As look, with every head bowed and every eye closed, that's the invitation I want to give you today. This invitation to simply say yes to Jesus. As look, maybe you come in here and you're new to this whole Jesus thing. It's like that's great, Pastor. Yeah, that'd be great to say yes to Jesus, but I don't even know what that means. Listen, don't overcomplicate it. It's just simply saying, God, I need you. It's just crying out to Him. It's about a prayer of surrender. It's simply praying these words in your heart with me, this prayer of surrender. It says, God, I recognize I've made more than a few mistakes in my life. I've sinned. I've gone my own way, and yet I'm tired of spinning my wheels. I believe you created me for more than just getting through life, but actually experiencing life, the kind of life that's only found in a relationship with you. And so, Jesus, I'm saying yes to you today. I'm saying yes to a God who loved me enough to leave heaven to come to earth on a rescue mission, to die on a cross, to pay a price in full I could never pay on my own, to make a way where there seemed to be no way so I could be in a relationship with you. Because of the amazing grace of you. Where on that cross you paid a price in full for not some of my sin, but all of it, past, present, future, that because of which I could step into the promise and the joy that's found through the empty tomb. By being reminded of where life is really found. And again, I'm not talking about just breath. I'm talking about real life. This life that's found only in a relationship with you. And so, Jesus, I ask you to come into my life, to be the Lord and Savior of my life right now. I'm accepting this invitation to step into the party. As God, we give it all over to you. We thank you for this hope and this joy we have, that because of the empty tomb, that means I don't have to live my life empty, but I can live it to the full through this relationship with you. God, we give it all over to you. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Well, hey, just a couple quick things. If you prayed that prayer, hey, I encourage you to tell somebody. You know, one of the best ways to tell somebody what God's doing in your heart, what God's doing in your life, is through the step of baptism. And so next week, I invite you to prayerfully consider, if you've yet to ever take that step of baptism, hey, to go public with the decision you made today through taking that step. And so if you're interested in doing that, you can sign up in the lobby, and man, we'd love to just celebrate with you next weekend on that. And then also, hey, if you got more questions, it's telling you a great place to dive a little bit more deeply into really looking into what Jesus did for us and who he is and why does it matter for my life, is these Alpha courses. And so we got one starting in a couple weeks, and I think there's still a few spaces available. And if you're interested, I encourage you to grab one of these Alpha cards, and I'll have all the information on how you can sign up. But with that, love you guys. God bless. Hope you have an amazing, happy Easter. All right?